Alex Sherman is speaking next. He's our mastermind of platforms and how to help us think about how we go about things in strategic ways and what the technical tools are. Thanks, Alex.
Thank you. So let me probably lower a little bit the degree of emotional degree. So we'll talk about data. So, and also I do acknowledge and understand that I'm standing between you and lunch. So I'll try to make it brief. And please feel free to interrupt me at any moment. So let me bring you one thing that usually people don't talk at disease-specific conferences about. Your disease is not unique. There are many other diseases out there. So as we heard yesterday from the FDA, there are about 7,000 rare diseases. And only 5% of them, 5%, have something that they may call a cure, or at least a medication that is addressing some symptom. All right, is it better? Okay, so once again, 5% out of 7,000 plus rare diseases have something to brag about in terms of medications. So other diseases are looking for the attention of the industry, meaning that they compete. So once again, that's very important. Our disease, ALD, competes with 7,000 or 6,500 other diseases out there for the attention of the industry. That's why we do need data. Why? First of all, so we also heard yesterday about natural histories of the disease. So companies do need to prove to the FDA that their drug works, or device works. They have to show that their drug, or people who are taking their drug, perform better than average natural history people without a drug. So the second thing is that they have to have validated outcome measures and biomarkers that we heard about yesterday and today, that they can show to the FDA that indeed so levels of, I don't know, some labs, biochemistry labs, go down or go up, temperature goes down or up, and so on. So meaning that only way to do this is to bring the data together from all the patients, ideally in the world, bring the data together, analyze the data, and allow the companies to have access to this data with scientists, with academic researchers, and so on, to bring this data together and say, look, the FDA, these are the biomarkers that we plan to use in our clinical trials. So the second thing, what we need to do, and that's the reason, one of the reasons why ALD is, besides the data and patients bringing all you together, we do need clinicians who know how to administer those outcome measures in some kind of a standardized way. So again, we can prove that it doesn't depend on a clinician, the results of the clinical trials. And the last thing, what we need to kind of bring this to disease in front of the industry is available and willing patients. The problem is that only 1 to 3% of patients participate in clinical research. In rare diseases, it's more, maybe 10 to 15. Right? But because diseases are rare, so it's not enough information. So what we decided to do is to figure out how can we bring all patients to become research participants. The goal, that's, is it I, is it battery, Din? So there are all kinds of data sources that we can use. So from clinical trials, if we eventually get to clinical trials, and we can ask pharmaceutical and biotech companies to give us the data from clinical trials, to bring this data together and to reuse it for outcome measures. I'm going after a new mic, I believe. So also we have a wonderful source that is called electronic health records. I'm ready. Yeah. So thank you. So electronic health records. Then we discussed natural histories. So we discussed biobanks, right? So we need biofluids from patients in general. So to know what's inside the bloods, what's inside the spinal fluid, and so on. So we have image banks. We have patient-reported outcomes, and we'll talk about this. We have genetics information nowadays, right? So now it costs about $1,500 to do whole genome sequencing. But the question is, who will analyze this data, right? So we need thousands of those files to analyze. So it costs money. So, and it costs also resources to share data, to store data, to download data, because it's a huge amount of information. So all kinds of, probably you heard the word omics. So meaning proteomics, metabolomics. So basically all results from different scientific methods of analyzing biofluids, genetics, and so on. So now we heard today about cell lines, right? So we have so we're growing cell lines, so we can analyze them as well. And now those things are ubiquitous, or mobile apps. So how can we data from mobile apps? And now we can figure out, I mean, can we trust the data from mobile apps? So I don't know about you, so probably Ben, by the virtue of living in California, uses mobile app all the time. So I walk with my wife every weekend, trying to walk around the pond, local pond, and the difference in mileage, 20%. On our two phones, iPhones. The same application, so can we trust it? So these things are being called real-world data or real-world evidence, and I do know that people from pharmaceutical, from the industry here are aware of this thing. So the FDA distinguishes between regulated data that are coming from clinical trials and everything else. They don't trust any other data, in a sense, so it's being called real-world data. Now the question is, how do we convince the FDA to trust the data? And it's not just about our disease, it's about all diseases in the world. How do we convince and say the way we collect the data, the way we treat the data, the way we curate the data is standardized enough and validated enough so we can bring this evidence to the FDA and to be considered as the real data, not real world data, but real data to be trusted. So we created a bunch of tools, but let me, for the sake of time, let me talk about tools that we need for this one. So basically, because we don't have clinical results yet, and even Bluebird Bio, so we're by the virtue of working on many other trials in the same kind of vertical, so they cannot share yet with us data from their clinical trial. They're promising, and I mean, we definitely we appreciate of this, but they cannot do this yet. So, but we have other resources or other sources of data that we have. So health records, right? So we come to hospitals for any reason, and clinicians are supposed to put this information, visits information, into health record. The problem is that, let me say this loud, health records are not meant to keep clinical data, or especially disease-specific data. So they were created for two reasons: liabilities and billing. So you can put standard forms like medications, encounters, visits, labs, vital signs, but you cannot put functional rating scales, you cannot put neurological exam in there in a structured manner. You can put it in an unstructured note, but then you have to use natural language processing to figure out what that means. So natural histories, that's why we created called NeuroBANK. You probably heard this term. The thing is that we have to figure out how to bring how to centralize and aggregate information on a single person from multiple data sources. So we came up with this notion calling NeuroGUID, G-U-I-D, Global Unique Identifier, who used patient portal. Any people here went to a patient portal? 3, 4, thank you, 5. So there is an invitation, and I will show you in a sec, how to use or create a neurological global unique identifier. Why we need it? So this is a string that we cannot reverse engineer back to you, but we will know that this person is in this data source, that data source, and that data source, and then we can bring this information together and saying, this is an aggregated for this person, for multiple efforts. So we also built NeuroBANK that allows us to bring data from multiple sources together and then visualize this data and analyze this data and then download this data for analysis and donate this data for anyone who wants to study this. So, and then we have the portal, and let me just walk you through this. So first of all, this neurological global unique identifier. So don't get scared. So what do you do when you go into this generation or generating of global unique identifier? You're presented with this very personal questions. So you ask names and so on and so forth, but what's important and what's usually what is not known to others is the place. The problem with this, and I would love to emphasize, because I mean, hopefully you will use the portal and then you will come to clinics that also use the portal or NeuroBANK and so on and so forth. You will be generating these NeuroGUIDs again and again. So the way this works is that you have to enter the same information every time. So basically, there is a difference between Thomas and Tom. There is a difference between Brooklyn, New York, and Manhattan, New York, or New York City, New York. So it will generate different goods. So usually it's being recommended to use birth certificates information to enter this data. So, but at least, I mean, you may or may not do this. So Ben and Benjamin will be different, right? But what you can do is to remember at least what the consistency of the information is the most important thing. Justin, you wanted to ask something? No. Okay. So, okay. So you enter this information. This information does not leave your computer. That's very important. So don't get scared. We're not remembering this information at all. What it does, it takes this data fields and converts these fields into 3 gibberish strings that in computer science they call hashes. Print those 3 gibberish strings and send them to the server. The server generates a random string that we call global unique identifier and returns it back to us. So this NUCY71PRJ is that random string that we call global unique identifier. If and when you do the same exercise again, the same gibberish strings will be sent to the server. What the server will do is to say, oh, do I have these strings stored? If I do, I will return this global unique identifier without knowing what's inside those strings. If I don't, I will generate a new global unique identifier. So that's why the reason I'm spending time on this, so a lot of people say, oh, you're storing, what about, someone hacks your database and so on. So we are not storing personal health information and personal information on you guys. That's very important. Any questions on this? All right. So, and we created, initially at least, as part of the ALD Connect, we created this ALD Connect People-Powered Research Network, where we have 5 hospitals, University of Minneapolis, Mass General, Kennedy Krieger, Stanford, and University of Utah. And yesterday, are all clinicians, all investigators from those hospitals were here. Today, some of them left. So, and these hospitals are using NeuroBANK, a platform into which they can enter data from your clinical visits. But they can only enter data if you consent or ask them to participate in this clinical research. So consent means that you have to do several things. So first of all, it tells what we were going to do with data, and then it will tell you two things that are very important. One, that the global unique identifier will be used. Why is it important? Because, right, so we cannot reverse engineer it back to you. Why is it important? Because we can say that the same person in this study, in that study, and in that trial. The second thing is it says in the consent form that my data will be used for any medical research purpose. The importance of this statement is that usually we say, and my data may be used for ALD research at Mass General. That means I cannot bring it and merge with data from KKI and analyze it together. It also means that I cannot compare your data at Mass General with data at Mass General from other diseases as controls. So that's why we insisted, and our IRBs, Institutional Review Boards, agreed that this is an important statement, and we're asking you to sign this. All right, and we consider this NeuroBANK as an accelerated research environment. Why? Because we have standardized library forms, we have pre-certified clinicians and coordinators who were trained in entering data into this. So it's like a normal way of entering data from clinics, from health visits, from healthy visits, if we could say this, and so on. So also we can merge this data with biofluids, if someone collects biofluids, with imaging files, with whole genome sequencing files, and so on. So basically we're creating these planes of information on a specific disease that we can use for several reasons. We can, first of all, because it's de-identified, basically we can take this aggregated information and analyze, or give pharmaceutical companies to analyze and see where they dig it up. Another thing that the highest goal is to give it to anyone, right? We're discussing today the wisdom of the crowds. So there are many people out there who have the knowledge on how to crunch numbers, right? So quants on the Wall Street. So insurance people, they know how to do this. And they may have some affinity with the disease, but they don't have access to data. So this is another kind of opportunity for all of us to do this together, and maybe someone will figure it out outside people in this room. Okay, patient portal. So Florian was showing some of this yesterday, and we discussed this today. So basically, we're asking you to tell us what's important for you. We're asking you to tell us what are we forgetting to ask you. All right? So we're asking you to join for us, and one thing you need to do is to remember that this is a family account. So ALD is a family disease. There may be carriers, there may be children, there may be caregivers. So we're asking you to remember this. And when you do this, first thing you do, you register with your email, nothing else. And then we will ask you for whom, for which member you're creating this profile. Right? And then you can say, I'm an adult with the ALD gene, or I'm a carrier, unaffected carrier, or I'm a child, as a member. And then for an adult with a carrier, or a child, we're asking you to generate that very global unique identifier. But before doing this, we're asking you to consent.
meaning that without that consent, we cannot use your data for research. So, and here's the consent to participate in the research. So any data you will be entering there, if you want us to analyze the data, or rather we do want to analyze your data, so you have to consent and allow us to do this. So, and then what do? We collect some kind of information. One thing that was shown today already, so basically we're asking you, what do you believe we need to focus our research on?
And there are all kinds of things you can do, and you can enter additional topics that we may be forgetting to ask you. And that's very important, because if we see that the same topic shows up again and again in your comments in other field, we can add it as a formal standardized topic in our next release. So then we're asking you, so what were the challenges while you were going through diagnosis? We're asking you, so what services do you need that may be missing? And then we're asking you, so what resources could help you that we don't have? And that's where all this discussion yesterday and today is coming to, right? So tell us what you need, because this is, yes, we do have people with the gene, with the disease that are part of this effort, but there are only 2, 3, 5 of them. But wisdom of the crowd, so 5 is not a crowd yet. So help us here. So, and that's the most important question. Are you interested in joining future clinical research projects and trials? Without that, we cannot contact you for clinical research. All right? And then we came up, probably you heard about this NeuroTracker. So this is what our clinicians with patients help are kind of came up with this NeuroTracker, 15 questions from 0 to 3 or 4 or 5. Some questions had 5 answers. And we're asking you to enter this information. And this information may change. So we're asking you to come again to the portal and enter NeuroTracker information again. It may take you probably, I don't know, who tried to do this, Justin? 5 minutes? Maybe less, maybe more. But what it does, it allows us to analyze this. So we can present you with the summaries. We can show you how does it change either individual questions or the entire NeuroTracker answers in time for you, or we allow you to compare it against others. The same. So kind of patients like me, if you wish, for ALD. Right? So, and I will not go through the but we have all kinds of, analytical tools that may be used and may be interesting to our researchers, or maybe even to you. So, we go by phenotype, so there are different answers based on phenotypes. So there may be some information, maybe not, but there may be some information that we can dig out and use for the benefit of research and cure. So we coming up with all kinds of creative ways to present this information. So this is for I believe pediatric cohorts. So what's important, and as you can see, different colors represent different questions, and then the fonts represent the prevalent answers. So the same is for a different cohort. So basically we're trying to be creative without maybe not even knowing, but I can assure you that a lot of companies are asking us for this data because this is what's important for them, right? Even going after symptomatic things is important. And sometimes we discover new symptoms that were not known. So this is the latest data from NeuroBANK and patient portal. In NeuroBANK, currently we have 200 patients, and we're asking for more, and I will tell you how you can contribute. So those are the age groups, and so as you can see, the Mass General, University of Minnesota, and Kennedy Krieger are the largest practices. And I'm not talking about that people in other organizations are lazy. I'm talking about number of patients in their practice that are consenting to participate in this research activity. So we have all kinds of phenotypes available. Why is it important? Because industry people are looking for these specific phenotypes, and they're coming to us and saying, do we have enough to start a trial? Or which sites do we need to pick up for our next trial? Or what eligibility criteria, Florian mentioned this morning, what eligibility criteria we could use to have enough patients for our clinical trial. So this data are extremely important. So the same in the patient portal, we have almost 500 accounts created. But as you can see, only 157 people, the last row, entered information into NeuroTracker. So maybe people were curious. They created, looked at it, and say, So, but we encourage you to do this and to encourage you to do it consistently. In this case, we can have some analyzable data. So we have 28 people who are both in NeuroTracker, in patient portal and in NeuroBANK, in clinical care research. How do we know this? Through neurological global unique identifier, because we know that these people spayed here and there. So we can compare information from our longitudinal clinical visits of these people and their answers, what bothers them, what symptoms are there, what problems they have, and what NeuroTracker answers they are. And we can correlate this information and maybe dig out some new knowledge that we currently don't have. All right, so on the positive note, so anyone knows those letters? What's in it for me? So I would love you to change this answer to this. What can I do? So let's start with the definitions. Do you know that the word patient and the word passive come from the same root? That means suffer. So another word that comes from the same root that I would love to substitute with is passion. So let's be passionate, and that's where we were before I started talking. We were passionate and emotional. Let's continue doing this. So what can we do? First of all, I would love us to redefine the word patient. So we're not patients, and especially with newborn screening, right? So they're not patients. They're people with genetic mutation, but they don't have symptoms. They're not patients. So they're people with ALD. So I would love us to start using this terminology. And we can come up with some acronym like PALD or something, your PALDs. So we can come up with this, and maybe we could have a prize, crowdsourcing challenge, how to call people with ALD. So what can I do to take action? So from my perspective, the more data, the merrier. The better it is, and the more chances we have to convince industry players to come to us and say, hey, we believe your disease is ready for our attention. So for this, I would love you to insist when you come to clinical visits, ask your doctor, do you believe you may share my data with ALD Connect? How can you do this? Can you join NeuroBank study, natural history study? Can you, send the data to someone? So let's talk about this. So research projects. So ask, are there any research projects out there? So don't wait, don't expect. Doctors are busy, coordinators are busy, as you know. So ask them and ask to join. And also ask to join clinical trials. But when you're joining clinical trials, make sure that the company will be willing to share the data and bring the data back to the community. So read carefully consent forms. I'm sorry, industry people out here, but I would advocate for data sharing. And for this, I would love us to insert those consent forms in there. Into consent form data sharing yes, when the trial is over, when the drug is approved, it didn't work, but the data are important. So, and visit the patient portal frequently for the data. And advise us. So wisdom of the crowds again. So we would love you to tell us what to do, what's missing, as we discussed and heard today. All right. So one thing that Ben mentioned this morning is in ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease community, we have a program that is called ALS Untangled. So all of you are using some kind of alternative or off-label treatments or approaches to treat your disease. So what we have there is we are asking patients or people with ALS, PALS we call them, to tell us what do they want us to study. And then they can vote on the importance of this. And then I mean researchers and academic clinicians around the world, actually, what we can do is investigate and see what's important, what's not. Most likely it's nothing there, but sometimes we think that there is something, and then we go into clinical research or even clinical trial. So we can do the same here. All right, so where's back? Sorry. So basically we can, and we're planning for many years to start this program, and I believe we should be starting this program. So another thing is that, do you know these guys? Anyone knows these guys? So the names are Pat Quinn on the left and Pete Fratz on the right. So these two kids in their late 20s were diagnosed with ALS. And they started an ice bucket challenge. Anyone participated in the ice bucket challenge? No, I did. Oh, there are people. Thank you. So basically, they challenged people to donate data to ALS. And a bunch of people did it. Actually, several million people did it. So, and politicians, billionaires, teams of millionaires, they all did it. And we got about $250 million of money to ALS Association, and that could be shared between research and clinical care. So why the money is important? The money are not important per se. I mean, it is, right? So, but the reason this is extremely important is that it attracts brightest minds to come and look into this disease, because researchers, clinicians, or clinical researchers are looking, or basic researchers, they're looking for grants and so on. This disease, ALS in this case, has money, so people are coming to this disease and studying and trying to figure out the disease. So it's kind of a chain reaction, right? So we need to figure out how to do this. And this is what I kind of trying to challenge you with think about during your lunch and maybe even after. How can we get to this? Thank you. So I know lunch, but questions?
So that was great. Does anybody have any questions on that? I know people are probably eager for lunch.
Yeah.
The NeuroTracker, I worked on it a little bit last year, and I just recently did it, just filled it out. Do you have any plans to modify some of the questions? Like there's that one question about mobility, and there's 4 options. I walk well, I'm occasionally unsteady, and then the last 2 are redundant. The last 2 are I require a wheelchair and I am wheelchair bound. And I don't know, there's not really a distinction there.
That's what I was talking about when we need the wisdom of the crowds. So basically this is quite embarrassing actually. So after a year or 2 of using NeuroTracker in our portal, so we have 2 people with ALD, Justin and Brian, who told us that NeuroTracker makes no sense, or certain answers make no sense. So that's why actually we have a work group, that works on the improvement of NeuroTracker. So I would turn the table around and say, Justin, when you are going to give me the right answers to this question? Questions? Please.
Sorry. So you said that the industry people would like to use the data. What about the other profession people? Like me, for example, if I'm interested in get some information from the group. If I diet or diet-related therapy, when I can get it, I have to ask you, or what happened?
So great question. So basically, first of all, we have to have this information, right? So basically, I'm not sure we have diet information in NeuroBANK. Maybe we do. So, but I doubt. So first of all is that if we decide as the community that a diet question is important or exercise question is important, or what type of exercise you do and how does it, right? So I mean, what Ben told us this morning, it's enormously important, right? So all his experiences, and then you can all share and say, no, this doesn't work for me, this does work for me. And then we can do and have some analyzable data. But I need to know. I can build this. I have 25 people working. Not just on this disease, but in general. But so they can build, but we have to know what is specific to this or to your interests. But the answer is yes. So Florian, Michael first. I'm sorry.
You have that checkbox that says you're willing to participate in clinical trials. It might be nice to have a second checkbox that says you'd like information about, or you're opting in to be contacted by ALD Connect in the future, because someone might not be ready to participate in a clinical. No, opt in. You know, like you feel you're allowed to contact me. It won't violate my HIPAA rights if you, like. There's got to be an easy way for people that are diagnosed new to opt in to be contacted by ALD Connect.
Right. Yes. And that was the initial reason for that checkbox. So with newborn screening, actually, it's a brand new paradigm. So because obviously these neurotrackers, those neurotrackers do not work for this, right? But we need to know. So I think it's a great opportunity for us to start newborn screening natural history, where we can do this.
I'm Bill, the aerospace engineer. What is the Ice Bucket Challenge?
Ice Bucket Challenge is, as I mentioned, so you know what ALS is?
Yes.
Or Lou Gehrig's disease, right? So
I had a colleague at Lockheed Martin that died from it 20 years ago.
yeah, so it's a terrible disease, and life expectancy on average is 3 years. So people live from 9 months to 10 years on average.
You got about 3 years.
Yes. So, and what they did, it's like a trick. So they're saying either put a bucket of ice on top of your head or give money for ALS research. And it became viral, and people were doing this. Oh, they were doing both. For fun, they were putting ice, and then they were donating. So kind of it was counterintuitive. But also what they did, they were challenging. So it came to become viral. They were saying, okay, so and now you have to challenge 3 people you know to do the same. So I don't know, Zuckerberg challenged Gates. Gates challenged Bush, and so on. So it became kind of a chain reaction. That's what I'm looking for. Huh? Yes, I'm sorry. It was on Facebook. Actually, if you go to Google and say Ice Bucket Challenge ALS, there are all kinds of fun videos out there. So another thing I would love you just to mention, I forgot about this. So the same Richard Bedlock from Duke University that runs your ALS Untitled program, he also runs a very interesting program. So he's looking for outliers. He's looking for something or someone who reversed the disease progression in ALS in that case. So if we can figure out among patients or clinicians that there are people who are getting better, not worse, so it would be very much interesting to analyze and see why. Florian.
Yeah, so I just wanted to raise the possibility that beyond the disease-specific questions and surveys, that there might be disease non-specific ones that could go across different diseases, for instance, ALS or Friedreich's ataxia, and maybe keeping those so general that, regarding diet or other things, that there could be some cross-fertilization and knowledge that moves back and forth. I think that would be one way to incentivize people's participation if they want to learn about what happens or helps in another disease.
Absolutely. At the same Johns Hopkins University, Chris, so we were running 3-year study for exercise in ALS, whether strength versus repetitive, whether stretching helps. So I don't believe you saw the results. Right. So that's cross-pollination is essential, especially in rare disease or neurodegenerative space, where certain exercises may be helpful across the board. Absolutely. Thank you, Flora.